Hello, everyone. My name is Jenna,
My name is Hannah.
and joining us today, we have another music therapist. Anneka, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Anneka Bell, and I am a music therapist at Neurosound Music Therapy here in Fairfax, Virginia.
Yay.
Awesome. So, Anneka, tell us a little bit about how you found out about music therapy and deciding that was the career path that you wanted to go into and those early stages of applying to college.
Oh yeah, so I found music therapy kind of late in the game. I going into my later years of high school, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. Like I knew it was very much in like art, music area. It wasn't until my piano teacher kind of just casually mentioned it in kind of like a group of this is what you can do with music or piano specifically. And I kind of looked into it more and I felt like it was like a field that was like different, but also like kind of met a lot of like what I was looking potentially to do. And then I kind of looked at colleges in my area. I live in like the northeastern side of the U.S. And I admit my research and like college like research into music therapy could have been a bit better. Um, but I think what I was looking for, I think in my college experience, especially auditioning, was like looking for a school that was a small college as well. Like I found that like it was more personable as well. And I ended up going to Elizabethtown College. I liked how it was a very like personable feel as well as like getting to know like the professors get to know you. It was a very small classroom between like students between like maybe 5 and 15. And I think that really helped me get to know. And as well as I think looking into like the different experiences that like the program offered. For me, I really liked how Elizabethtown we got right into the practicum. So like from the very first semester, you're either observing whether it was like all the different range of clients or just like specifically into the second semester, like one client. So being able to see that progress from like a semester's worth of student practicum students.
I feel like that's unique.
Yeah, I didn't know about that. Yeah, I feel like, I think in my experience, we did maybe like a little bit of observing in the first year, but really didn't get into that until the second year. So that's kind of cool that you got that experience so early on.
Yeah, I think it was something that really drew me because especially since I didn't know much about music therapy, like as a field and like being to observe. And I think that's one thing I would have changed, like going back, was being able to like see like and meet other music therapists before going into college. Because my first experience like watching a session was during that first like assigned um, practicum.
So with Elizabethtown, like I know you mentioned a few things you liked, but what was something that really stuck out to you that you really enjoyed? And what was something that you would change if you could do it again or what you would want to see grow in the program?
Yeah, so I think again, music therapy at Elizabethtown, I think it's very much a community. Whether or not like if you're a music therapist or the music ed side or like the kind of the more general music degree, I think the professors there in general, beyond music therapy, were also very helpful in like knowing how to like get the resources that you need or preparing you for like the different like kind of musical aspects. I think that was like the thing, especially forming that kind of like niche cohort and like being able to get to know and have a really personable experience. Um, I think one thing I would like to see like kind of grow would be kind of like the focus on um, like student mental health because music therapy, especially music as a field, is a very like rigorous course, and I think it's something that they're like definitely are taking steps towards now, and because like we have like the music core of our therapy. Like, so we have like the theory, we've got like the RO skills, but we also get that as well as like music classes and the kind of the outside like general core or like psychological classes. So kind of coring it all together, it's like a very heavy like course load for minimal credit as per se, because some classes were again like 0 credits. And I think like taking that opportunity to be able to make sure students are okay and like being able to show growth in that field because we had a lot of like students who realized like this wasn't the field for them. And I think kind of presenting that kind of face front would have been helpful. And also something is I've learned, I think, being as a new professional within my first year, is realizing also like how my college experience like is different slightly from like per se like what I'm seeing now. And I think something I would love to see grow would be kind of touching into kind of like how we assess in a sense like and something I pulled from like my neurologic music therapy training I did in December was like how using other fields as like assessments and like how that informs us, especially ones that are more like knowledgeable for like physical that we're not necessarily kind of trained on, especially since we kind of touch on a lot of different aspects like of the body um, in our field.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
I would agree with you on that.
So can you talk a little bit about what theoretical orientations you were immersed in college, if there were some that your professors really focused on, or if it was more of widespread and you learned about a lot of different ones, because that can be a large part of music therapy is finding what fits you and how you identify as a therapist.
Yeah, so I my college right now I think it was for my professor that had just recently retired, but she was very heavily focused in like neurologic science, so neurologic music therapy and like how especially trauma informed. So we learned a lot about the it's polyvagal theory, um,
Oh yeah.
and how like the like nervous system, especially like responding to different stress and like how that impacts us as music therapists. So that was a very big aspect of my college career. So I think it's definitely informed and helpfully like with like kind of looking at that kind of neurologic music therapy aspect as well. But I would say my specific orientation, I like being eclectic and like very much person centered. I think a lot of my clients like they are while they all have like similar like diagnoses, they are very different in their personalities and how like I approach them.
Kind of going forward when it comes to internship, obviously we know you did your internship here at a place to be. But in terms of finding an internship that worked for you and deciding where to go and applying all of that stuff, how was that process like for you?
When looking for internships, I was trying to look for ones that like kind of were kind of centrally like kind of close to my area because it is like a big commitment to be able like to move across the state, especially since a lot of our internships are unfortunately not funded. I think again I did was looking kind of across the state, not realizing that. um, but I think when I was looking specifically in my internship, I think I kind of had a very kind of narrow focus, and I think I should have broadened it a little bit. I got very interested in the medical field during my kind of junior and senior year, and I think that might have been impacted a lot from kind of like COVID experience for the last like second half of my college years. And I think what I was looking for there was kind of like kind of a broad range, like being able to see different kind of aspects of like that, like per se the medical and the different units as well there. I think some of the not college, the internships that interested me were like ones that kind of had unique experiences. Like one had like a night shift, which you don't necessarily see, or being able to work on like multiple different like kind of hospital units. But I think specifically what spoke to a place to be with me was like getting to know and like talking to your guys' representatives, um, like from my freshman year. So getting to see that progress, and especially since how that touched for me, like growing up in like a theater background, like how the performance arts also ties into the music therapy work that you guys do there is what I was looking for. And I think especially like looking and like talking during with interviewees, I think also looking for people that like, kind of see the progress, like and also like the growth and potential in me, because that's something that I learned, especially with facing a lot of like initial rejections after like interviews, was kind of knowing that like these are the people that kind of see me potentially growing in this field, versus like some of the feedback I got from the other internships.
What do you feel like you grew the most in during your internship experience? What was the most valuable information that you gained?
For me, I think my biggest growth was seeing the kind of wide aspect like music therapy, like what our sessions can look like. Because like when you get into like kind of the practicums in college, like it's like you kind of have a sense of what they're gonna look like, especially since you have like friends or like also working with the same clients. And like depending on like where you are, I think your practicums can kind of vary to like what is in your area. And I think for internship, like I think I got to see a wide range from like whole groups to working with like specific groups with like strokes or who have had strokes in the past, or like the kind of the performance aspect of it. I think from like kind of the wide population, but also the kind of needs of what happens like within a session. Like I think what I learned like coming, I had a mindset of like music therapy has to be like music 24/7, like whether or not it's just you kind of playing in the background if a client needs a break or something. And I think kind of learning to accept those silences, or just even for sessions that are like for clients that like don't feel comfortable yet, like playing either just kind of like simple games until they kind of get comfortable. And I guess like the wide variety of what a music therapy session can look like.
I know towards the end of your internship that you got, in terms of a place to be, some preparation for the CBMT exam. But what was your experience like independently taking the exam and preparing for it? Was there like a lot of study tools you used, or what did you find helpful when preparing for it?
CBMT, it's definitely a study experience. It feels like going back to college in the sense of like studying for a big exam. It's I definitely saw like the advice that I saw a lot within like kind of the community was that it's very much objective based. So you kind of need to learn to remove yourself in your own kind of personal opinions of how you would handle a case, because the people who write the exams are very much like this is like what would kind of be like the best route of the options given to you. So you have to kind of think kind of from their point of view. And I think the best way to figure that out is like kind of definitely taking the practice exams, whether you just like kind of read it, but also just like take it so you have an understanding of what the questions look like, but also read the answers and then why they pick those answers, and that can also give you a sense in how they kind of format things. You can definitely like review a lot of like the theory. It's the one thing that you don't really think about like going back into your music theory, especially like ones that like you might not necessarily touch on. Like I think something that surprised me was like the kind of the guitar knowledge, and like different modes and different things, which was something we didn't really touch on that I remember either in college. I think definitely like kind of um, accumulating either with yourself or like with like either fellow interns or like fellow friends that have been in the field, or in your classes. Definitely kind of like group studying is also big helpful and like a big motivator, as well as like seeing like other materials that you kind of brought in with each other. I think definitely the help that I was given at a place to be with like kind of the files that they've had was also very helpful.
What advice would you give to anyone preparing to take the exam? What did you find was the most helpful for you?
I think definitely it's a long exam. Like I think they allot you 3 hours and I spend the majority of my time in there just kind of like reviewing. I think definitely take some time to like breathe, and like if you need to take like a 5 second like rest in between questions, because it is a long exam. Like you're sitting in like a cubicle with like other people taking like different tests, whether it's like realtors behind you, and kind of getting like in that like that kind of mode of like being able to sit there for a while, like whether or not you need to stretch, because I don't know if you're allowed to leave the rooms. I don't remember. um but definitely get in that mindset, but also like try not to overthink. It's definitely easy to like when you have a question like to overthink and like potentially change your answers. A lot of times like what you kind of feel on instinct is most likely the right answer. Definitely go through like all the questions. If there's ones that you don't like think that you know, you can always mark them. They have that nice feature where you can go back to the ones that like you don't um necessarily know immediately what the right answer is. And definitely again, like if you need accommodations, whether that's like in your own room, I think definitely put that in. I think you put that in for the when you first initially sign up for the CBMT.
Yeah, I would agree with that too. I feel like people often forget that you can do that.
Yeah.
But it is an important aspect to ask for those accommodations if you need them. In terms of sort of post passing the exam, in terms of continuing education, I know, this was relatively recently, so there isn't like a whole lot probably that you've done besides the neurologic music therapy training. But what do you feel like is most beneficial for you in terms of continuing education, and where do your interests kind of lie in terms of taking courses or like going to conference or the different kinds of continuing education that you can do?
I think I miss going to conferences. That was one big thing. That again, oh, I think going back to college, that was another big thing. We were really lucky to have. Like we were doing a lot of funding to be able to get us to conference. But I think definitely conference was a big area. Just like as grow, you get to see a lot of different professionals share like their experiences in the field, as well as like ability to like network with other people in the community. I think that's a big one. I know they've been doing a lot of like online, um, and like finally getting back into person as well. And I think definitely like look in the areas that like of interest to you. I know I'm still like researching like what can be counted and like kind of writing your own like the ones where you kind of have to do a write up. Um but I think a lot of ones like that definitely interest you, especially one thing I want to do for getting outside continuing education credits is like kind of if I'm looking kind of at the kind of the future, like the master's aspect, and like definitely looking. I know I want to do something in the field of like that it joins with music therapy, but not necessarily like a master's in music therapy, like something that can supplement what we do because I feel like we do touch on like a lot of different aspects, like whether it's like speech or like physical, like a little bit. But I know because there's very much like people that go like there's reasons why they specialize um, in the different fields. But I think because we touch on a lot of them, it would be good to have like more like additional knowledge, especially since I'm realizing a lot of my kiddos like do visit a lot of these different other therapists as well. There's a lot of them who spend a lot of their weeks in multiple therapies.
When you're kind of thinking about master's degrees and things like that, we've had this conversation with several people already of
Mhm.
getting a graduate degree in something that's not necessarily a master's in music therapy, but something sort of adjacent to it. Where are you leaning, and sort of why are you leaning that way? And what do you think is important to consider? Because I feel like that's something that a lot of people have been talking about lately.
Yeah, like I don't know if I think necessarily in one area at the moment. I think I've considered speech therapy, especially since a lot of like some of my clients I work with who have work with like have speech goals as well, especially if you're looking at kind of the neurologic music therapy route. A lot of those techniques that they've developed like do work on that kind of speech route, and I think that's kind of where I'm seeing a lot of my current clients come from. Where I use neurologic music therapy the most would be kind of those like speech areas. I've also considered art therapy because like art was a very much a big thing growing up with me, and how that ties into it. I think a lot of these also something I need to do more research on is like looking at how getting additional degrees in those fields, especially since those are ones that like typically require like master's level into entry. This is also something to think about, like kind of with like our field and how that ties into it as well.
So kind of sticking with the neurologic music therapy for a second, going off our assigned list of questions. You talked a little bit about how you use it a lot with speech goals with your clients. Was that something that you were anticipating when you first were signing up for the training, or what really interests you about that training? And is there other ways that you feel like you use it to inform your work?
I don't think I necessarily saw like as like kind of the big aspect of coming out of it. I think I'm realizing I think any of the kind of assessments we do, like ones that are more like the neurologic or like speech rehabilitation or stroke, tend to really kind of come my way, because I think I'm the only one at the moment who's currently certified that in my office. But I think it's definitely a lot of the techniques that they offer, not offer that they've developed are very much like kind of similar to things that we do um, in our field kind of already. Like kind of like for example, like kind of like in older adult facilities, like if you are singing a song, and like help practice like the cognitive recall, you kind of fill in the blank, like you do like my Bonnie lies over the, and then like they repeat kind of the ocean part of that. but kind of like also the cool aspect of like doing a little bit of the training is kind of getting more in-depth knowledge of that, like, and kind of like where you guys can take that, and also like how that impacts like kind of the other areas, so kind of getting a more like in-depth knowledge of like how like what we're doing and how that informs like neural like aspects of that. I think it's definitely helped with like also expanding to like what I can do. Like potentially, I have one client I worked with before who was like working on memory, so like working like how to think of that, and tying a lot of what I do. I think a lot of what we do is the kind of the aspects, but kind of under having a better understanding um, of how music impacts the brain.
Yeah, definitely. Kind of moving forward to job related questions. What was it like looking for your first job as a music therapist? And what advice do you have regarding like searching for a job? And what were you looking for specifically? That kind of stuff.
Yeah, when looking, like at the present, like I was still living down here in Virginia, and I kind of still do. But I was thinking it's like kind of where I kind of wanted to be, and like financially as well. Like I did move down. I moved somewhere for my internships. I knew lots of friends who like were, when they were looking at for internships, they were very much like staring because of like financials and everything. Like looking at internships like in their area. I think that was a big pose like of where I want to be. Is like, do I want to kind of continue searching this area or continue looking at home, like how that plays financially? Because like living at home and like living independently are like kind of two different ballpark and fields. But also the aspect of like looking at like where currently music therapy jobs are, and especially talking with like other friends that were kind of at the same stage, kind of like leaving internship and going into the field, is because music therapy is such like it's a small community. It's one that it's a population and a field that's still growing, and advocating for ourselves is knowing kind of where the jobs are and like kind of how that plays into how we work, because like we're not as big and broad as per se speech therapy or physical therapy, so it's easy to like kind of move. But what I'm realizing, especially like looking at different like job opportunities that come in through, especially through like the Facebook communities, is like that they tend to center on like big kind of the cities with like large populations, whether it's Austin or out in California, and how like moving could impact that as well. Because especially going long distance wise, like even that way, that's a lot of like carrying everything over. And especially like if there's not a job in your, like the whole process of kind of creating your own job and becoming an independent contractor is a whole different field, an avenue that like can take a lot more like energy and process to get your stuff into. So I think looking for me was like I was like definitely looking in this area. So I'm thankful like I was able to find Neurosound through here, but also kind of looking at home in that aspect and weighing those kind of pro and cons. And specifically like looking at like what kind of job offerings were there, were they like long time, were they short time, and what specifically is like designated in like the other benefits, or like what they're asking, because there's some jobs where like they're not necessarily looking for a music therapist, or are they looking for more like a recreational something, and like how does that play into like ethically what we do, um, and like how potentially if you're starting there, like how you can grow that program out.
Yeah. What do you feel like you considered in terms of working for an organization versus working independently, contracting? If those were things you considered, what do you feel like were the pros and cons of those experiences?
Yeah, so like um of the jobs I currently applied when I was looking for a first job, and they were all jobs at the moment, that were like full like salary based, so it was like on like the one side of the table. But I think looking in those benefits, like looking at like kind of like either the pay rate, what kind of benefits they were offered, like do they offer those continuing education credits like within the budget as well, the kind of population and fields that they kind of going are in. But I have friends who are doing the more contracting work, and I know from what they've told me, the kind of like the difference in considerations is like a lot of the times they do like they just get the names, so they're the ones who are doing the advocating in a sense. Like they're taking the initial steps to reach out. They're doing their own forms. They don't get as much like I guess like templative like work, the pay is also different. Like you're getting paid like kind of per clientele that you have, so that can vary your income um, as well, like having to do your own taxes, and how that can also contribute as well. I think something especially with contract work is I know my friends like also had to supplement their jobs. So like I have friends that are also piano teachers as well. And that's something I also did on my side because like coming into my first job, um, I knew coming into it was very much an hourly based. So it started off small before I took over another music therapist's caseload. So like knowing like additional ways to supplement and how that impacts like your growth and like what happens when you kind of switch that toggle or when you get like that promotion per se.
Can you speak a little bit about your experiences with moving to a new community, and how do you find places around you that you join that community in? How do you meet people? Because it can be very lonely, moving to
Yeah.
a place and not knowing anybody.
Yeah, definitely like moving 3 hours down. Like I didn't prior to knowing it, I really didn't know anyone in Virginia. Um, I think definitely getting out and like kind of looking at the events kind of in the area, whether it's not like the parks or like kind of something in your hometown. Like I live like living close to DC, that kind of provide that kind of avenue of like, oh, like different things I can explore and visit. I know some people I think find like friends either through like kind of those online apps as well, like kind of going through um from friends. Like I know I was lucky enough to come down with my internship with one of my members from my college class, so that also helped. But also, like potentially reaching out to like people that I knew in the past. Like I have a friend who lives out in DC, that I met a couple of times. I think definitely like the hard aspect of is just kind of getting out there in a sense. I'm very much an inverted person, introvert, so like I kind of like to stick to myself. But like also having roommates helped. Living with other people who've lived in this area their whole entire lives, so like getting to do things with them also help kind of broaden that social bubble.
Yeah, definitely. In terms of your work now at music or at Neurosound, as a music therapist, can you sort of share about your work? What different positions have you kind of grown into while you've been there and working with different kinds of people in your professional career, or worked like specifically in a niche, which I know you talked about a little bit, but what kind of stands out to you as you reflect on like the beginnings of your career?
Yeah, so I started off at Neurosound in like kind of hourly position. So I would take on like kind of the new clients, especially since we currently work Tuesday through Saturday. So we see a lot of our clients on the weekends, because that's like kind of a kind of a sweet spot with clients. So like parents, it's like we don't work. It can take you in, especially with kiddos who have a lot of like therapies throughout the day. Especially like I realized like ABA therapy like is several hours per day, and that usually eats up a lot of client availability. But I started off there, and then kind of moved into part time, and like kind of going into full time as well. And I think the populations we see is a wide range. So some of it, a lot of the times I spend my mornings like in the older adult like residencies, especially working with memory care. And then like we see a lot of like people, clients in our office, but as well as out of office. We do offer at-home therapies. We also have a lot of contracts with different groups systems. Several of our therapists are certified in the more mental health aspect. So we see a lot of um, residencies in those programs, as well as juvenile detention programs, as well as some school based IEP needs.
When talking about in-home services versus seeing clients at an office, I know that's something that a lot of people don't have a lot of experience with, where it can seem kind of daunting to offer services in home to people. What's been your experience with that specifically, and the difference between working with clients in their home versus working with them in your office?
Yeah, it's definitely a different mindset because like you have to like bring on your own gear. You don't have everything sitting in one spot. And in some ways like clients can feel a bit more comfortable like being in their own home, and it does like make it easier for some parents like transitionally. But But I also kind of learned it also can lead to distractions, especially if other siblings are in the room, like if they're like watching TV or something, like how that also plays and kind of like where we can do therapy, whether it's in like the living room or sometimes I've done sessions on the floor in the dining room because like brothers running around in the other area. So it's a definitely different mindset of like you kind of have to be cautious in a sense of that area, but also like kind of be more thoughtful on like what kind of things that you bring because you only have so many hands and like bags as well, so like kind of like what kind of things that you carry as well as something I'm noticing is like all my different visuals and different manipulatives like where are like the kind of times when you like need to make double of different things and have one in your car and one at home or what's the ones that you're kind of bringing back and forth that might get lost in the transition. It's definitely a different kind of like mindset and like how you just kind of have to think about your sessions and how you set up different things. So like well as like kind of how you're able to like transition and adapt different things to be able to meet where your clients are at.
Yeah. What do you find is like your go-to stuff that you're going to bring in your materials that you'll always have with you in the car or will bring with you either to a contract or to those in-home sessions?
Yeah, definitely. I currently have a piano in my car. Um, in my car, yeah. Previously, I had four for one of my other groups that are at home. So like, and that was a group. But I think definitely having a good, not a guitar, a piano with like a battery setup has been helpful because that way I don't have to like look. It's like okay, where can I plug this in? That's kind of been the area. I think that's definitely been helpful. A lot of my kiddos at the moment love especially since a lot of my home clients tend to be on the younger side, like manipulatives like apples and bananas or five little frogs or ducks. I think definitely kind of the turn taking aspects. I kind of bring some of those things as well. But a lot of it's like kind of like definitely it has to be instruments on like the smaller end. Um, Usually I've kind of I find the best, or like if I'm bringing like kind of a bigger instrument, kind of knowing that's kind of like especially like one off ones that I don't necessarily bring in all the time.
So, kind of going back to the profession itself of music therapy, where do you feel like the profession is going in the future? What would you like to see more of? How do you think that our profession can continue to grow over the next several years?
Yeah, I think I know AMTA is doing a lot of reconfiguring now right now, and I can't speak to knowing like too much about what's going on with that area, but I think definitely continuing to advocate for ourselves, and like especially as we are getting into that like legislation thing, and I think there's like people still kind of continuing that steps. And I presently am not involved in anything, but kind of seeing like, okay, now we have the licensure. Like, where's the next step to actually getting the like approval? Say for say Virginia, like I know we have licensure, but that really hasn't gone anywhere beyond like getting like the steps to getting that as well. I think something that I'm seeing a lot pop up. What I also saw a lot in my college was like the idea of burnout in our profession, um, and how there's like a number of people like either intermixed in our field as well as like leaving the field. And I think a lot of those situations are coming to light of like the pay and like the financials of like being able to sustain being a music therapist because it is expensive doing those continuing credits or having to move across. Like some people very because like with their significant other it's hard to like move into a place that doesn't really have like the ready available jobs, and I think it's like a conversation that's important especially in our field that's like we're such a like we're still a growing and small field of like knowing and like taking the time to know like why people are leaving, whether it's like later on in the career or even just earlier, and how we can either not stem it, but we gotta have an understanding of how to better support our music therapists as a group, especially like the younger professionals that are coming into a field, because we are a small field, and that's one that like it might take more convincing for like people to understand what we do, as well as like understanding also the aspect of like the financial aspect, especially with an internship that is like unpaid and how that impacts like people's like opportunities.
Yeah, definitely. Um, that is the last of our questions, Anneka. Is there anything else that you would like to add before we finish?
I can't think of anything. It's been a pleasure talking with the both of you, and getting to share a little bit about what I do.
Yeah.
We appreciate you joining us. It was always good to see you, always good to catch up and chat. Thank you, Anneka.
Thank you.